Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda, ma'am?
Madam Mayor, there are no additions, deletions, or reordering. However, we did find, thanks to Commissioner Maliga, a typo. Consent item B in the staff report and the resolution. It states that it's a level 2 charging station when it should read level 3 charging station.
What page is that on?
On the whole contract.
Oh, well, all the way through.
It's I've already replaced it in the resolution, so it'll be printed properly. I did not redo the staff report.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody have anything they want removed or, okay. And next is the electric utility update by Ed Liberty.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and fellow commissioners. We're going to go through about a 28-slide presentation. Some of these materials you may have seen before, but we thought it would be helpful to push into the public arena the perspective on where we began this journey together, and what I call the journey is the turnaround of our electric utility, and where we are along the road in the process, and kind of the as found, if you will, situation, what we had when we began this journey together, and what we're working on today, and to give you some examples of what we're working on. So I'm going to share my screen to go to the PowerPoint presentation, if that's helpful. And if it's not, we can go back to doing it without the sharing. But this is out in the public, so folks do have it. And of course, you can stop and ask questions along the way. So you should all be able to see the presentation now. And I'm trying to get it to go to the next slide. Let's go to the next slide. There we go. So we're going to provide a perspective on what's been accomplished over the past 3 years, and share with you a little bit about what we found when we began together. So by the fall or late summer of 2017, these are the things that I observed upon my arrival. And again, I'll mention this to some of you. This is going to be a little bit of a blunt assessment of where we were. And I do this from the perspective of having been involved with mergers and acquisitions, purchases, divestitures, expansions of utilities, kind of the person on the ground ahead of time as a part of an advanced team, or the person coming in to help manage the operation to turn it around and go in a new direction. Over the course of my career, I've had the opportunity to do some of these before at different levels. So first bullet, we have a utility, or had a utility at that time, that was experiencing declining performance. No secret to anybody here, but we had frequent outages and we had poor reliability. That's probably the single biggest thing, takeaway that I had here, feedback from the customers, what I read in the press, and talking to various people, that was the situation here. Many other issues, but that was certainly something that was very, very high on the radar. And in the interview process, this is something that came out. And in my assessment on the ground, it was readily evident that that's what was in fact happening. We had increasing costs, or underlying costs were going up. And as a utility, we had promised rate decreases to our customers under what was known as rate parity. And that had in fact already started. So we were in the process of decreasing the rates while our costs were going up. So if you will, gross margins were being squeezed, and that was having an effect on the enterprise fund balance. We had a high level of turnover in staff, and we had a leadership vacuum, not necessarily a leadership vacuum from the dais or from the city manager's office. We had a leadership vacuum in the chair that's here in this office, and staff was under a revolving situation with multiple leaders coming and going, and various stints of temporary or interim leadership. So that was a problem. However, we did have, and still have, very proud to say that we had and have a very proud workforce, competent workforce, very proud, frustrated as well. Many of our labor departments, our labor groups, particularly the IBW, were working under what were not necessarily put expired here, but their wages were pending. They had not yet been negotiated as had been committed to. So we had an open item which was to finalize the negotiation on their wages. And then we went through one contract renewal and then through a second contract renewal with some new wages for folks. The gap was particularly large in what I would call a high-skilled craft. A point in case would be our linemen, for example, which is a very, very skilled craft. They perform very dangerous work. It's a work set that's very easily and apples to apples benchmarkable from utility to utility all across the country, and certainly here in the state of Florida. So our folks were well below market rates, and that was leading to frustration on their part because they felt they weren't being paid fairly. And there was certainly some merit to that argument. However, they were all eager to learn, to adapt to some new work practices, to increase productivity, professional staff as well. So it wasn't like we had a workforce that was not wanting to do better. Everybody was recognizing that there were things that needed to be improved and more than willing to do their part to do that. Now, we did have a lack of knowledge of some things that I thought were very, very fundamental that needed to reside in the chair here in this office and have people have a thorough understanding of what our power contracts were, who they were with, and what the unit costs were, and what the elements of those costs and the cost drivers were. There was not a good understanding, quantifiable from a dashboard perspective of reliability. And then when we get into rate making, there was not a good understanding of the elements that go into rate design and having proper rates going forward. We were also lacking, my observation was that the organization lacked in best management practices. And I want to make sure I describe this well. It's not that our folks weren't capable of learning these best management practices, but because the organization had existed basically in an island and in a vacuum for a number of years, it was not up to date with best management practices in the utility industry. So there was room for improvement there, and I had very little or no resistance on the part of staff to adopting those best management practices. One of the things that was particularly onerous was the wholesale power contract that we had at that time. That had some clauses. You have to bear with me for a second because we have a vacuum cleaner running in the hallway. Is that noise coming through, or is it just me?
Yeah.
If you just give me a second, I'll ask them to stop vacuuming. Just hold on a second. Bear with me for a moment.
We're hearing some kind of a high squeak. I don't know what it is.
Ed thinks it's
The squeaky vacuum.
1900.
I never would have guessed that.
Me neither.
Okay. Sorry about that, but housekeeping is here and they're doing their evening rounds and they're vacuuming the hall. Sorry about that.
Thanks, IT.
Oh,
Well done.
we did have a power contract that had been put in place and starting in January of 2014 that had some clauses which appeared innocuous, I'm sure, at the time, but after we had a failure of the GT2 gas turbine in the fall of 2017, those clauses, which were not readily understood, became very powerful and punitive and very expensive. So we had to work our way through that. So what we inherited in 2017 is all of the things above the here we just talked about. Then we had a little hurricane called Irma that came through and cost us a bunch of money. Then we had a failure of the GT2 turbine and some steeply increased costs for wholesale power because of the availability of that unit falling below a 90% target. Not things you all have to remember, but to say, hey, things were in pretty tough shape then. We also had a significant issue with some a federal regulatory non-compliance finding that was lurking in the background. These were issues related to our transmission system that had not been properly closed out or attended to in the opinion of the regulators. When you're called in front of the regulator on something like this, you do your best to explain how you got to that point and how you're going to go forward from there. But we did have multiple notices of violations, and we did have penalties, one of which was pending, and we were able to negotiate that to a lesser penalty, but we still paid a penalty because of some things that had happened in the past. We also had a completed audit by the county in regards to our inventory management practices that had some concerns. So that was pending, that had to be resolved as well. And I want to get to the next page here. Why is it? Here we go. Infrastructure. It was my professional opinion, and certainly evident in the field, and the staff would like, had no problem saying this, that we had decades of infrastructure decay. So very little investment had been made in the electric transmission and distribution infrastructure that served our customers. So consequently, that was leading to not only an out-of-date design that was not capable of delivering best-in-class reliability, but also was bereft with maintenance issues and failing components. We had aged critical assets that were well beyond the typical useful life. Yet these assets were relied on daily for delivery of energy to our customers. Staff was doing the best that they could, and they were really in a reactionary mode, crisis management, just keeping the system going day to day, month to month, year to year, without really having the opportunity to take a step back and put in place the programs to get out of the circumstances that we were in. We had poor preventive maintenance practices, largely because staff was in this reactionary mode. And there was some lack of funding, although we did have $14–15 million in a Bank of America loan from a prior bond issuance, but it was not enough to begin to tackle the problem, and there was conflicting direction on where to begin. There was also a lot of discussion or lack of processes in my analysis, and you don't get to satisfactory performance, let alone best-in-class performance someday, without processes and a clear understanding of the roles that each member of the team should be taking on and playing, and that they have the skill sets. And you'll hear me use this term a lot, which I borrowed from a gentleman I worked with for many years ago, the privilege of focus for people, to allow them to do and follow through what had to be done. At the bottom here, very important statement, for strong support for what needed to be done. Seated leadership and customers were insistent, certainly deserving, and supportive of significant change in how we were running the electric utility. Turnaround began in late 17 into 2018 as I did my assessment and said, okay, where do we begin? We had to establish priorities, and we had to identify what those projects were, and that became what you'll hear us referring to as the poorest performing circuit. From the poorest performing circuit to the best performing circuit. But we needed to have quantifiable information. We had to have a dashboard that was data-based, factual, not hypothetical, not based on opinion, but hard data. So we had to do things there, and you'll hear us talk about how we created auditable, industry standard reliability calculations, and then force ranking our circuits from the worst to the best, obviously wanting to begin with the worst in terms of the turnaround. We began defining the projects and quantifying them. So what needed to be done, and what might it cost, and how long might it take? We needed staff and leadership to buy in. In all fairness, I arrive on the job, and staff is wondering, is this another director that's passing through? So they needed to know that I was here to fix it, and that they were going to be here to fix it with me. So staff and on the other side of the table, leadership needed to know that yes, this team has a plan, but it's going to take time to execute this plan. We're going to need money. We're going to need to be able to borrow that money. We're going to have qualified contractors, engineers, and staff, and we can't borrow more money than we can effectively put in the ground or put up in the air in a reasonable amount of time. So it needed to be prudent. We had to select the engineers and the construction contractors that would help us do this. So we selected a cadre of consulting engineers and construction contractors through bid processes, supported by our procurement department, to get them on board, ready to do the work that would be coming down the pipe. And then with the very strong support of our finance department, really did a lot of the heavy lifting here, was to clean up the financials, because here we were ready to go out to borrow a large sum of money through bond issuances and refinance debt. We needed to make sure that the books were all in order, that we could make an intelligent cohesive, consistent, logical presentation to the bond rating agencies that were very much needed to rate our bonds, and then ultimately to investors that we were counting on. So a thank you to our finance department. They selected an able financial consultant in Davenport, and we went into the process of getting ready there. These are some of the actions that we took, and you've seen this in our annual report, but I think it's worth touching on. We won't have to go down in great detail, but I think it does give a perspective of the types of things we had to do. These are what I called structural initiatives. And some of those are kind of self-evident from what you saw before. And by the way, a lot of these slides came right out of the presentations that were given to the rating agencies and to the investor community that we were counting on to actually buy the bonds, which, as we all know, they did in great numbers. Top left, and I'll just click left to right as we go down through these. We did develop very detailed energy supply cost models, got right down to the very, very nitty-gritty detail of the unit costs from each supplier by time of day, hour of day, day of month, and month and year, and really built that up. And then we had to forecast where we were going. So where did we think our load would be going? So in terms of customer count, but also in terms of the kilowatt hours or megawatt hours that we'll be sending out to our customers, and how that price would vary over time. We had to get control of spending. Probably one of the single biggest things that we did there, besides renegotiating our power contracts, and we'll come to that, was eliminating non-productive overtime. Not an easy thing to do. It doesn't necessarily win me a popularity contest, but we needed to really restrict our overtime to the overtime that was productive. Productive, as I define it, as improved reliability. Number one mission. And we went through that process. Went through a process of implementing monthly financial reviews, very detailed financial reviews, drilling down in a lot of detail, probably driving some folks crazy with the level of questions that I asked, the level of depth and nuance that I was looking to get out of the numbers and understand where they were coming from, tracing things back through. Created some very detailed financial modeling, and I go through those with my staff at least once a month, usually 2 or 3 times a month, understanding exactly what numbers are hitting our books, where they're coming from and where they're going, and how that fits in relative to our budgets that we've committed to for the year. We increased our spending. So as we cut costs, we reinvested that savings into activities that specifically improve reliability. So we want to make sure that everything we do falls into one of our pillars, which is safety, reliability, customer experience, things like that. Improving, making a difference. We restructured staff roles and responsibilities. This is why I use that term again. Privilege of focus, making sure that everybody knew what their role was, just similar to a team on the field. Somebody's going to snap the ball, somebody's going to run long, somebody else is throwing the ball, somebody else is on defense, right? Everybody's got a role to play. Every position is important. And we want to keep people in their swim lanes to make sure that we achieve the mission together. We significantly improved our wholesale power contracts, and we took on an active management role, what I call managing and actively nominating our capacity. To put that in perspective, you've all heard me use this number before. We've dropped about $9 million a year out of our cost of wholesale power compared to where it was in 2017. Now, some of that, I will grant you, had to do with gas prices coming down, but a lot of it had to do with eliminating onerous sections of the agreement. First of all, competing the agreement again back in the competitive marketplace and restructuring it to have more of an active management role. We also took back active management of the gas capacity contracts that we had had for many, many, many decades that were not properly or ideally being monetized to the benefit of the city. Now they clearly are. That generates over $300,000 a year of gross margin and has been very, very helpful in turning things around. We retain subject matter experts to augment staff capability. We use the combination of new hires, specialty consultants, and established engineering firms that had a national portfolio of recognized clients. And we also brought back some retirees in very limited tasks and roles where they had some unique expertise and a work ethic and the availability and willingness to do it. to take on things. So for example, we brought back a retired lineman who now 3 days a week manages our vegetation management contractors and has done a significant, very, very good job, made some significant improvements in reliability just by being on top of vegetation management. And we've gotten a lot more productivity out of that function as well. We developed a clear strategy for our generation assets, not just, hey, we have a power plant that will be there forever, but understanding what its limitations were, which units cost exactly how much amount of money. So we had a good idea of what the unit costs were. We had to make some corrections in what our operating costs had been represented to the power pool to be, to get those dispatched correctly in a more cost-effective way. And most importantly, from an environmental point of view, is we took a very, very strong stand on where we wanted to go. So we've talked a little bit individually in our one-on-ones, but obviously carbon footprint, greenhouse gas reduction, impact on global warming is part of the fabric of the community that we serve. And it was important that we had a good understanding of what our carbon footprint was for our generation. The bulk of the energy that comes into the system or into the city is electricity. And that's directly under our control. So we want to understand what was or what is our carbon footprint and how do we drive that dramatically in a downward direction. And we've in fact done that, and that's all talked to in the annual report. Now in one-on-one conversations, we conceded it hasn't been understood or received as much as we would like, so that people could really appreciate just how much we've done and exactly how green we will be and carbon free we will be when those new plants come online in 2023, and then in 2024 be the first full year that will experience that significant reduction. So these are projects that we've committed to, and they take time to get built and be brought online and begin flowing power to us. But we've committed to them, and we are clearly going to be there. And I'm proud to say that I want to say that we're going to be the lowest in the state, certainly of all of the investor-owned utilities and surrounding towns and other utilities will be way below them in terms of our carbon footprint. Now that's a great accomplishment, but that doesn't mean that's where we're going to stop, right? So we have plans and a vision to go even further, and we will be engaging you in more discussion. I've already, the commissioners, to your credit, individually have come forward and asked that we have that discussion, and we welcome that, and we'll share with you our experience and what we think will take to go next. To make all of this happen, we needed a multi-year capital investment plan that was prioritized by an impact on reliability, beginning with that poorest performing circuit. So we had grand plans. We developed these grand plans, but you can't do it if you don't have this multi-year plan. And how are you going to roll out this investment? How are you going to refinance what we had already borrowed over years in bond issuances? And how are we going to go forward? And then recognizing that we had some things that were helping us. We had the mortgage on the Stanton project, which the city got into in the 1980s. That mortgage was at its end, so that mortgage wrapped up. And looking ahead, another $5.5+ million a year of cost reduction coming when the St. Lucie mortgage, if you will, that debt service runs out at the end of 2026. So that's something that we wanted to leverage, saying, hey, our costs are here, they're going down, but hey, in 2026, we take a nice step down. How do we leverage that to say there's money we need to borrow? So how do we restructure our debt to take advantage of that decrease in debt that's coming down the road, layer that into the portfolio with the support of Bruce Miller and our finance department and our financial advisors and all of the others that were involved in the financing, the big firms that we would recognize from Wall Street to structure that portfolio to help us do that. On the physical side, we said, hey, we're going to build a whole bunch of stuff. We need to define what is the basis of design and what is our construction standard. So that was not well defined. So if you're going to give consulting engineers the role of engineering and designing something for you, and you're going to compete them against each other, you need to say, this is the standard to which I want things built. So we needed to define that. Sounds kind of rudimentary, right? What is your basis of expectation? And we need to put that out there. Probably the single biggest thing that we said was category 5. It's been our desire to say, if we're going to rebuild something, if we're going to touch it and improve it, let's not go to category 2 or category 3. we need to prepare for category 5. So let's not have to come back later on and say, oh, we only went to a 1 or a 2, and unfortunately get hit with a 4 or a 5. So we are designing the category 5. Now, please don't come back to me. We have a poll come down on category 5. I said, I thought you said it wouldn't fall down. That's what we've designed for, and that's the structural design that we're going with. And there's a lot of things that happen. You've got water and wind force. You've got trees, vehicles, rooftops that come off of homes. And when you get into category 5, you just have to look over to the Bahamas and what happened during Dorian. And you can imagine with that kind of debris, airborne, what kind of electric infrastructure you need to be able to take that kind of a blow. So we're designing with the category 5 storm, but if a roof comes at the pole or the series of poles, that's a little bit different. We needed to publish our reliability indices. So we were not publishing in the public arena our reliability. And frankly, there was a little apprehension in putting that out, because thought was, do we really want people to know that things aren't great? But we need to be held accountable, and we need to understand what we're striving to improve. So you have to inspect what you expect, and you have to measure to confirm you're achieving the results you want. And we needed to have these indices and begin ranking ourselves against other utilities to get a good sense of where we are and use it as a measurement tool. Now, there will be ups and there will be downs. There's going to be some tough days ahead of us on our way to improving, but we expect them. We don't know when they're going to come, but we know that we're going to have issues as we strive to improve the system. But every month, every day, every year, every quarter, whatever you want to measure by, we should be getting better and better, and I think we are. We needed to communicate with the public what we were doing, because we're asking the community to support a bond issuance to refinance debt and undertake a lot of construction, and also have the patience with us to stick with us while we did this, not just the utility team, but leadership as well. So we launched our first effort at that, which was the communications type of website, the citizen-owned energy website, and also began to do more press releases. As we've shared, and I know a lot of you are very passionate about that and want us to do more, I agree 100%. Communications and customer experience are something that we'll never say is done. I don't think we'll ever say the box is checked and it's complete. We can sit on our hands and say, we got this, right? It's something that has to continue to evolve and get better and better and better. And we will certainly continue to do that. We talked about the need to improve our labor contracts, improve our pay rates for the people that really had worked for a number of years without pay raises years ago when the city was in a tough state financially, had stuck with us, and their jobs truly warranted a higher level of pay, and we did negotiate fair, open agreements with those entities to work with us. The customer service process had to change as well, and it continues to evolve, and that's something we're going to be talking a lot. Some of the changes that we made are down below here. We added after-hours call center support. Previous to that, after-hours calls were going directly into the system operations desk. So you can imagine, I use a lot of analogies, but the person just spinning a lot of plates during the time of an outage. So one person on the desk is taking phone calls from people saying my power's out. They're giving instructions to an operator in the field and a crew in the field on which switch to open, which one to close, which fuse to drop, which breaker to close or open, so that they can work on it safely. And at the same time, they're on the overtime list calling people to come into work. And then invariably somebody in city leadership is calling, or somebody from the press is calling. And that's all hitting that person on the phone who's taking a bunch of phone calls and keeping all the plates spinning. We had to take those phone calls out of system operations and add this after-hours call center function to receive outage calls. We also, with the help of our information officer side of the house and our webmaster, created much better online outage reporting functions, including streetlight outage reporting functions, things that are working much better today. To give you a perspective on streetlights alone, in my first fall here, we had about 820 streetlights that are out of service. I ordered that, within 90 days or something like that, 60 days, that be down to near zero. And we did that. So we put a huge focus on just getting the streetlights, many of which were new, working again. And they weren't working because they were bad lights. They were working partly because of workmanship, but because they'd also been damaged in the storm. and they needed to be returned to service. We implemented some new credit card payment processes, and we also went to a 7x24 and national payment capability. So what does that mean? So prior to that, we had thousands of customers who would come in and pay their bills in cash during business hours only at the city customer service center at the Annex building. That's it. So if you didn't get there by 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock on Friday and your power was out, you didn't come back on until Monday. Or you might get disconnected that night if it was a weeknight, you were stuck. With the Pay Near Me function that we established with the 7-Eleven and various other entities, customers can now pay virtually 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, anywhere in the country. Walk in with your bill from the City of Lake Worth Beach Utilities and pay in cash, and you don't need to come to our offices to do that. You don't need to bring all that cash all the way downtown. We have many payment centers where people can do that and greatly improve their safety and security and comfort, and also know that they're less likely to be disconnected. We did migrate to 100% remote customer service rep capability. So what does that mean? That means that the first phone call that the customer is making, that initial phone call that they choose to make it, is going to go to a call center, which is what we call off premise or off the platform. That means that if we have a power outage here in the city or we have emergency in the city, we still have the ability to take their phone calls because that first phone call is going to somebody who's off the platform. Now, that's not a perfect system. We're certainly aware that it has not been 100% successful, but we believe it's been an improvement. And that call center function, which can then be competed, assuming that everybody wants the business and can work with our technology, they have the ability to look into our customer service screens, interact with the customers, resolve some rudimentary issues, and that list is growing in terms of how many things they can resolve immediately in their first call. And then if needed, they escalate the call back to our service center in-house, where then our people, more experienced, local, will then take it the rest of the way to resolution. So those are some examples of things that we've done there. I know that this is something that a number of you are concerned about and want to see improved even further. And this is just to let you know that we did start, and we know that we're not done. We have to keep going. And we'll be talking a lot more about that. Operational initiatives, and some of these you may say structure or operation, but they're all initiatives that we undertook. Preventive maintenance, we stepped up significantly preventive maintenance of critical components, switches, breakers, insulators, substation components, transformers, and our generation assets. I'll give you an example. In the last couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks ago, we had an outage down on Lake Avenue. And what happened was a conductor that had a type of connector mid-span. We call it an automatic connector. They're a quick connector for putting two pieces of wire together in a storm. And it may last you for a number of years. However, over many years of expansion and contraction, corrosion, and movement back and forth, those connectors nationally, and this is an issue nationally, this is not something that's unique to Lake Worth Beach, but it's something that we certainly have. Those connectors, those automatics will fail. We had a couple that failed. They fell down across the active roadway. Fortunately, nobody was hurt. Nobody was nearby. No vehicle damage. But on its way down, it also took out the underbuilt circuits in the area. Recognizing that this was a serious issue, and we immediately asked for an inventory to be performed of where else in our system these existed. We do have hundreds of them that were installed over the years during storms. It's not unusual to put things together very quickly during storms. That's a practice we're going to change as well, to go to what's called a compression fitting, to compress it and have a much more secure, long-term, safe, and reliable alternative. So when we talk about preventive maintenance, we recognize that that's a serious issue, and we're out there ahead of it saying, just get out there and fix all of those quickly. And we threw resources at that to eliminate that problem. You'll see other things, for example, where we've wrapped poles with a black wrap at multiple locations. That is intended to stop the climbers, the iguanas, the lizards, rodents,
What?
from getting, I'm sorry. It's intended to stop, climbers from getting up the poles, getting into the circuits and causing an outage. We brought in the thermography technology and began doing infrared inspections, looking for hotspots that you can't see with the naked eye, but you can pick up with a specialized camera, and drone inspections as well of our critical infrastructure. Those inspections identified issues ahead of a failure. And we had well over 100, I think it was about 130 plus critical hotspots that we identified that were potential future outages. And we launched our resources at that to cure all of those hotspots. And that's not a one-time hit. That's now going to be a regularly recurring function of going out and doing these types of inspections to identify these potential problems before they show up as an outage. AMI, prior to my arrival, Wisely had invested in an AMI system. And that AMI system does give us some information. It has some issues in its own, but it does bring back some very valuable information to allow us to understand voltage imbalances and where we might have a potential problem to go address that. It also allows us to see that a customer has a partial power situation or an outage that the customer may not yet be aware of himself. So, and unintended, and also another benefit, I don't mind talking about this publicly because it's a deterrent. For the contractors that are out there, if you pull a meter to do work in our system and you didn't get a permit or let us know ahead of time, we will know about it and we will visit you. We want to make sure that the work at customers' premises is being done with the proper permits and is being done safely. Not saying we don't want you to do work for our customers, but we certainly don't want meters pulled out of their bases without us being aware of it up front. So the AMI system does allow us to do that. We've talked about increasing vegetation management. We talked about the animal guards. We increased the troubleshooter staff. Many people may not be aware that we have troubleshooters, or sometimes referred to as troublemen. It's one person in a truck on the property at all times. Holidays, rain days, hurricane days, Saturdays, Sundays, 2 o'clock in the morning, at all times is a trouble truck or two on the property roving, looking for problems that need to be addressed, whether it's a street light out or responding to an outage at a customer location. And then if they need more help, we call our crews in. That's something that we're very proud of. The IBW, these folks respond amazingly quick, and they're here generally well within 60 to 90 minutes on the job, making a repair from a call that they might have gotten at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And that's just a tremendous commitment on the part of our workforce to be here when they're needed. We did engage with our labor groups, and that's shown in effect in the measured performance of our outages, getting shorter and shorter. A lot of that attributable to their rapid response. We use controlled use of overtime to work on repairs, return circuits, and normal configuration. That means that we want things back in the ideal setup before we go away for the weekend. So if need to, we will work Saturday or Sunday to make sure that by Monday morning, if at all possible, our system is back to its most reliable configuration, given the limitations of its design. That we're not just going to hope for the best on Monday and hope that nothing else happens on Sunday, right? We want to make sure that we resolve the problem and we're good to go. Conversions to higher operating voltages, that reduced our circuit loadings. That was good for the customers that moved to the higher voltage. But by the way, it was also good for the customer who no longer has that customer next to them, right? So fewer customers on the older circuits helps the customers that are still on the older circuits. And it's obviously good for the customer that moved to the higher voltage, newer system. Mass removal of these problematic components, I touched on that. Open wire secondary, what is that, right? The wires that are lower on the pole, not all the way at the top, kind of in the middle, are what we call secondary. Many portions of the system, they're open wire. That's bare copper. Everybody should know in the community, if you're listening, watching tonight, please never, ever touch a wire. Stay away from them, but that is open wire secondary. It's highly susceptible to animal contacts and vegetation contacts. So as we upgrade these areas, we will eliminate that open wire secondary and go with an insulated wire. And we did move to a 6-day work week. In large part, it's not a standard work week. We do work Saturdays on overtime. We bring in 1 or 2 crews. We've been doing this for the better part of the last 9+ months, and they're working on capital work. So they're doing construction on Saturdays that they started during the week. They keep going on Saturdays, but almost as important, if there's an issue on a Saturday or something left over from Friday night, motor vehicle accident, Friday night's big party nights, right? We have our share of motor vehicle accidents that damage infrastructure. We have crews coming in Saturday now that, if needed, can also work on the emergency. And then we also changed significantly our storm response processes and our recovery processes, which, while it does increase our cost, it does help us have additional mutual aid crews here before the worst of the storm comes in, as opposed to waiting till after the storm, hoping that the roads are open and fuel is available for them to actually get here, and that they haven't already promised to go someplace else. So we now work to get those mutual aid crews here when it becomes apparent that we are in that cone of influence, which we hope never to be, of a storm. But we'll have those crews here earlier. That's a little bit of a different approach. Give you a sense of how our system is doing. We are selling more energy than we had in the past. So the darker bars are what we actually experienced through 2020. So we don't store anything here. Everything that we bring in we're bringing it in because we're selling it to our customers. We're redelivering it to our customers. So we have in fact been growing. We did have some periods where we dropped a little bit. That may have been storm related or stayed flat as conservation measures came in, right? Our customers on their own, I'll point out, are becoming more energy conscious. And just, I would call it, in the natural selection process, you can't go to the big box store today and ask for a refrigerator that's less efficient than the one you bought 20 years ago, right? You're buying through inertia stuff that's already more efficient than what you bought years ago. It's harder and harder to buy an incandescent bulb. More and more people have gone to the CFLs, and even, in the last 2 or 3 years, a lot of LEDs going into homes. We are forecasting some growth, and we've tempered our estimates of what that growth will be. And we don't just pick a number and leave it in stone for 5 years. We look at our growth every month, every quarter, every year, and we look at housing starts, projects coming out of the ground. And we also take a look at energy use per customer. And the energy use per customer actually is not growing a heck of a lot. I've actually seen a little bit of a steady or slight shrink. So the new customer, for example, if we look at developments like the Mid, those apartments are far more efficient per square foot than if you looked at an apartment that's 20, 30 years old, or a house. And I expect the same thing will be with the Bohemian. It's probably the same thing at the One. As the developments come online with modern technology, modern building codes, and modern equipment, they are by nature much more efficient than the older infrastructure in the city. And then as homes turn over, as new investors, new residents come in and upgrade their homes or replace equipment in the home, they're becoming more efficient in their own right. So that's a good sign. Peak is the highest amount of energy that we sent out at any one time. And just as in the total amount of energy we send out, we are highly, highly dependent on degree days. So we are largely a weather-driven utility, meaning that we don't have much base load. We're driven heavily by weather and new customers. So more customers, warmer temperatures, we grow the sale of our product. If the temperatures stay flat or go down, and we look at degree days every month, every quarter, every year, and we chart those against prior years, both heating and cooling degree days, to get a sense of where we're going and understand what the growth is likely to be. We look at trends in the state, we look at trends around us. We do know that we have a system that's largely built out, right? It's not a secret that it's hard to find an empty lot in town that doesn't already have something on it, right? But our advantage is that when people do expand, go vertical, or renovate and go larger, that our cost to capture that new customer is very low. So We don't have to make a lot of capital investment to acquire new megawatt hours or new kilowatt hours. We do have to make capital investment to improve our system, to make it more reliable and sustainable in storm conditions. But while we're doing that, we're increasing the voltage, as we've mentioned a lot, which is going to give us the ability to support coming growth in things like electric vehicles, which we would hope that many of our customers will turn to in the future and avail themselves of what is a very, very low-priced source of fuel for a vehicle versus the gasoline alternative. System hardening, reliability improvement. We've talked about this a lot. It's an acronym that we created in-house. This is not an industry term. Every utility comes up with their own, and we have pride of authorship over having adopted this one for ourselves and our homegrown logo here. But it is our intention, and we're moving in that direction, and we have the investment to do it now, to greatly improve, harden the system to higher category storms and make it more reliable. It's a multi-year capital plan that was well defined for the bond rating agencies and for the investors, and validated by an independent outside engineer that does not play a role in the engineering and design and construction of the things that we're building. So there's no conflict there. We're adding redundancy in areas to give us that we refer to as N-1, or multiple levels of reliability, multiple ways to serve that same customer. Big picture perspective, we want to reduce the number of outages that we have. When we do have an outage, reduce the number of customers that are affected. And for the customers that are affected, reduce the duration of that effect that we have on them negatively. That's the driver. And we want to bring technology in, because there is a limit to how far we can go with the system as we have it today. So we can do a lot of preventive maintenance. We can do a lot of vegetation management, and we will make gains, and we have. But you can't go to the next level without hardening and improving the system. And you can't get to the next level beyond that without deploying advanced technologies to more rapidly detect the problem, switch around the problems, and get those customers back. So it's a get better, get better, get better. And just as in we talk about customer service and communications, this is not something that we get to the end and we say, okay, we got there, we're now okay, right? We continually reprioritize what's the next course performing, where do we go next, what's the next idea, keep driving for improvement. And that is best management practice. That's what the utilities around the country do, around the world. The utilities that win awards, this is a part of their passion. This is what their management teams are incented and rewarded to do. This is how their executives are ultimately judged, of course, besides the financial performance, which we care about here as well. But this is what you do if you want to turn a utility around. This is the focus you need to have. Covering a lot of ground here.
Yeah.
We have actually done some of this. So I think we talked a lot about what we're going to do when we finally get the money. But while we were waiting for the money, we were doing things. We weren't stagnant. We had some money. So we started with what we had and really spent all the money in the piggy bank, right? And we found savings, and we're proud to say that we've been doing this now without asking for our customers to send us any more money, right? We haven't raised the rates. We're not proposing to do that right now. So we started on this on our own before the big funding came. So we'll talk about, I've taken all the code, the long designators, call it the West 13 circuit, phase 1. We have what we call the North Loop, phases 1, 2, and 3, and the South Loop. What does that mean? So I'll take you some examples of things that the public has already seen and experienced. So the West 13 at a high level, it is west of 95. It runs along the lake. It goes up the Lake Worth Road, and it drops down into the park a little bit, and it goes out to Engle to the canal and a little bit further west. So that's phase 1 of the West 13. We made a significant investment. That was our poorest performing area by far. We invested $2.4 million in that area to bring some relief to those customers. That project as a whole is planned over 3 phases, but we did go ahead and do phase 1. There are 18 new transformers that went in, 126 poles were replaced. you'll see a lot of wood and concrete construction. In the future, you'll still see wood, you'll still see concrete, and we'll be bringing in some steel poles as well, ductile iron steel as well. Phases 2 and 3 are currently in design for construction that will begin this year. A lot of numbers here. I'm not going to go through a lot of detail, but when we look at outages on the West 13 or any circuit for that matter, we'll show where we were in prior years. And if a customer experiences 3 outages, that's not one customer, 3 events, that's a 3, right? So every time you're affected, you get counted again. So that's when you say, gee, how do we get so many outage minutes? Well, we add up all the minutes of all the customers, right? But if we look over to the right, we have 82% fewer customers affected after we did just phase 1. So if we look at that circuit, we had 82% less customers affected with outages after we did the work. We had 16 fewer trip and reclose operations. Hey, that's a signal that when we do have a trip and reclose, it's affecting fewer customers because the number of trip and recloses didn't go down dramatically, but we reclosed quickly and affected fewer customers. We had 83% fewer breaker lockouts. So what's a breaker lockout? The breaker lockout means that the system tried to reclose, the fault was still there, and it locked out. And it stays out until we specifically go find and fix the problem. It's not a transient, it's not a palm frond, it's not a lizard, it's something else. Outage minutes dropped by 83%. And since July of 2020, this circuit has not had a breaker operational lockout. These things were absolutely routine, happening on a regular basis. Just put my head in my hands and say, we have to stop this, right? And that's what our customers were experiencing. So that's an example of a type of results that we're looking for. And we, in fact, did get that in that project. This is an example of the type of work that was done. This is over on Lake Osborne Drive, over off Detroit, where it tees into the lake. You can see the older wood pole. You can do your own count on how many different conductors are hanging off this corner pole. You can't see the bow in it. Using large cranes, equipment that we don't have. We have to hire contractors to do it. Setting a large concrete pole in place. These particular section has been isolated and grounded, so it's safe for them to work on. These are all temporary grounds that are hanging to make the system safe, but a significant effort. Again, a little bit different perspective. You get a feel for the size of the cranes it takes to put some of this equipment in place and the crews that it takes to do it. This is over on Lake Worth Road in Detroit. Obviously a much, much larger crane. In this particular case, this large concrete pole is being lowered into place between live phases. So what we had to do was spread them. We had to take this phase, put a spreader on, move it further out, cover everything with rubber, we call that line hose, specially trained folks that can operate around 26,000 volt equipment live, lift this pole up in the air and then gingerly lower it down between the energized phases into its hole in the ground, lift the hook back out of the way, and then begin transferring everything over to it. Very complicated, slow work to do.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Really, really
I
is.
don't want that job. Crazy.
But so and I know commissioners, you've asked the question, can our people do some of this? Absolutely, they can.
Not all of it.
Not all of it, right? And some of this equipment that you see in this picture, we don't own, and we couldn't afford to buy and couldn't justify it. Where it does make sense, we do. Amazing piece of work. An example of what the new construction will look like, bigger standoffs, harder for a critter to get out there. Insulators with a higher rating for resistance to ground, an animal guard on top to prevent an animal from bridging from the conductor to the insulator or getting over to the bracket, which is an insulated bracket as well. All of these things we're doing to just do the best that we can to minimize the outage. I tell people jokingly that working in the electric industry, and for those of you that are educators, you appreciate this. This is one of the few times that it's okay to look over at the other person's paper and copy. So it doesn't take a lot of imagination to drive around and look at what some of the best in class utilities are doing, whether it's in the Northeast where I was fortunate to come from, or here in the state of Florida, and see what others are doing and copy those best practices. And utilities do share best practices. We don't compete with each other. We all serve the public, and we want to serve them as safely and reliably as possible. And of course, the equipment suppliers want to sell the latest and the greatest. So we get educated, we look up, and we talk to our consulting engineers, we talk to our own staff, and we adapt the things that we know will work. We have undertaken projects with our own folks, and we'll go through some samples. So recognizing that we have a limited number of people, they're here to respond in the emergency, right? So I'll give you my little analogy. If you need a new starter on your car, you're not going to take it back to the factory in Tennessee or Detroit or Germany to have it fixed, right? You're going to get a local dealer, a local garage, and they'll fix it. Conversely, you wouldn't ask the local garage to build you a car, right? So there's things that you need outside forces to do, but there's still plenty of breakdown maintenance and preventive maintenance you can and you should do as much as you can on your own, and have the people there, because they're the ones that have the relationship in the neighborhoods, in the communities, those neighborhood associations. They know how to enter the backyards politely. They likely know who the folks are because they're local and they've developed relationships over many, many years, and they're recognized. People know they can trust them because they have the badge. They see it's a Lake Worth City truck, and it's good. So we do use them. We've talked about how we do Saturday work with them. There's also one or two crews, at least one crew every day of the week working on construction capital projects, sometimes two crews depending on what the day looks like. And then on Saturdays and Sundays, or Saturdays at least one or two crews. We did this work while we were waiting for the bond funds to become available. So we got out there, which also allowed us, by the way, to beta test or demonstrate and learn for ourselves what the work practices needed to be to do this work of converting customers over from the older voltage to the new voltage. Get a feeling for that. So we knew what to ask our contractors and how to write the bid specs to get results that were equal to or better than what we had demonstrated we could do on our own. So we didn't want to go backwards, we wanted to go forwards, right? And I also wanted to make it very clear with our folks that it's not a competition. We're not asking our people to work as quickly as they can, counterintuitive as that might be. I want them to work as safely as they can. That's most important, that they are doing very dangerous work. And if it takes longer to do the job, but it's a safer way to do it, then that's the way I want them to do it. We're not giving prizes for speed. We're giving kudos and thank yous for finishing the day safely, both for them and for our customers. So we talked about having 4 kV circuits that were operating beyond their desired limits, significantly beyond that, and the aged infrastructure and a lack of operating flexibility. Looping projects. So a looping project is when we'll take two circuits and loop them together so we can feed the circuit from one end or the other. That only works for us at the 26 kV at the higher level voltages. Putting customers from 4 kV circuits together, for example, taking 2 circuits that are already overloaded and transferring customers from circuit 1 to circuit 2 doesn't work because circuit 2 has no room for them, right? So we needed to upgrade voltage, loop those projects, those customers together, improve their reliability, and move things along. So using our own resources, we undertook over $1 million worth of work in fiscal 20 and kept those projects moving along. 9 circuits were involved that we looped, upgraded, or converted. Over 1,200 customers have been directly affected. The last 200 or 300 are underway right now. Our own forces set over 356 new poles, 142 transformers, over 17,000 feet of wire, and we did that safely with no unplanned outages. So that was a great work that was done by them under the leadership of Walt Gill, who you've all known for a number of years, and Mike Jenkins, and our IBW leads, foreman on the job, and staff that did the engineering to support that. North Loop, we won't go through the deep dive on the streets, but in blue and red, you can see the areas that were affected and what we refer to as the North Loop conversion. Here you see Lake and Lucerne. North along the golf course, these customers were all converted. Additional detail along Lakeside, just how far up we went, and in doing this conversion, going all the way down to the lower end, the middle end of the golf course area. The South Loop, much more complex, about $231,000 just in that alone. That was completed phase 1 in February of this year. and we continue to move forward with the subsequent sections. Growing concerns kind of from a technical and operational detail, which we'll be hearing us talk a lot more about. A problem in the industry, and certainly evident here in Lakewood. Some of you in your prior tenures on the commission may remember some of these. Direct buried underground conductors. So there's a generation of what we call in the industry cross-linked poly, or XPLE, which refers to the type of insulation that was used on these conductors in the 1970s, 1980s, that over time will fail, develop microscopic fissures, absorb moisture, and have a general breakdown and degradation of the insulation, allowing a fault to ground to occur in these circuits. These are particularly problematic because they were in a directed buried application, meaning that they were not placed in a protective PVC or plastic conduit or steel conduit. They're just directly buried in the ground in sand, and then covered up, 3, 4, 5 feet underground. They've begun to fail around the country. They certainly have failed here. It's happened here, not only out in our distribution infrastructure and transmission infrastructure, but it's also happened in the power plant itself, where a lot of the equipment was direct buried underground in the dirt. So back in 2016, there was a failure of the 138 kV cable, 138,000 volt cable serving GT1. That failed and was subsequently replaced. In 2020, we had a failure at what we call East Switch, which is over at 2nd Avenue South by the railroad tracks, just west of the tracks. We had a failure there, caused a significant outage in town. Had to make repairs there. That was XPLE direct buried. And then at the end of 20, in December of 20, we experienced a failure almost identical to the failure that we had on GT1's cable in 2016. Virtually identical failure occurred on GT2, which affected GT2 and S5. And that was just returned to service today. And it took us close to 3.5, 3 3/4 months to repair. Now, the significance of that is during that period of time, we lost our emergency start capability. So we've been operating on a single tie line. That's not necessarily new to everybody here, but we have these underground components that put us in a position of extreme, concern during that period of repair. So what does that mean? They're all going to have to be replaced. So we're in the process of doing an inventory of our system to determine where these cables are that are in what we would call critical applications or critical situations or implementations where they affect hundreds or if not thousands of customers if they were to fail. Certainly we have failures, for example, just in some of our neighborhoods of condos and homes that were built in the 70s where the service lines to the homes were built direct buried underground. And we've experienced failures there. In the condo communities on the west side, in College, rather in the northeast side, not necessarily College Park or Silverhead, but up in the areas up there in the Heights, for example, Vernon Heights. Those are services. But we're talking about big cables that affect hundreds, if not thousands of customers fail. So we are going to do an assessment, an inventory of where they are. We're going to force rank them. A lot of these are cables that go into and out of our substation, which we intend to rebuild the substations largely anyway under the SHRIP program. But what it means is that some of these projects, some segments of those rebuilds will have to be accelerated. So the substation is one that we're not going to get to for another 2 or 3 or 4 years. We may need to go there ahead of time and deal with the underground conductors on a preemptive or proactive mode. And we're in the process of doing that analysis. So we covered a lot of ground here. This is a scene for some of our folks here. We are here for you, and we are here to serve the community. And I just did an awful lot of talking, probably wore you all out. You may or may not have questions, but I'll turn it back over to you. I'll stop the share on the screens and go back to normal.
Okay. Drink the water.
At the university.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Liberty. Okay. Now we have presentations. Madam Clerk, are there any public comments?
There are no public comments that have been received online. I don't know if anybody submitted any blue cards, though.
Are there any questions on Mr. Liberty's, any succinct questions on Mr. Liberty's presentation?
Yes, ma'am.
May I
Yep.
pose one question?
Yeah, public comment.
I'll give you a comment first,
Thank
if
you.
you'd like.
You can fill that out later.
Sure.
It's not a big crowd.
Can you all hear me okay?
Yes,
Why
sir.
don't you come up to the microphone?
There you go.
Maybe the mic's not here, but
We can.
I can hear you just talk louder. My name is Cy Kane. I have a couple of interests. I've lived in this area 40 years. I work with a set of 3 electricians that have recently merged, and they have a large lighting, electrical service type company. I also work with a UK firm called Best Energy, British Energy Savings Technology, which has a worldwide contract with 7-Eleven to reduce their energy usage, and Kentucky Fried Chicken to reduce their energy usage. We recently have installed a chain of grocery stores in Canada and 3 Walmarts with this technology, and took their monthly utility bills from $50,000 a month, and we reduced them about $15,000. So the technology that I'm talking about goes into an end user environment using a technology internationally recognized as IPMVP. And what it does is it allows the end user to do measurement and verification of their own electric usage. And they're starting to use IoT, Internet of Things. We have a new circuit that goes in freezers and can connect up to 200 freezers together. And there's another circuit device that controls air conditioning. Now, FPL has a set of devices, they're not very sophisticated, that they're distributing, and they do that under FPLES. And while I was sitting here, I was thinking that they also have a relationship with Jupiter to Questa Electric, and they sell generators and do electric services for their customers. Would Lake Worth, the manager, I'm talking to you and everybody else, be interested in discussing a relationship with a local licensed vendor of electric to get into that business in a separate public-private venture, and have some of these facilities to possibly generate some additional revenues to put towards what you're doing, and have that arm-in-arm relationship with a vendor that could support your customers in those system upgrades. You know, I've talked to Bravo, and I've talked to some of the other local firms. I've also gone into Palm Beach State College, and I know that they're looking at measurement and verification as a way to lower their electric usage.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, the 3 minutes has elapsed.
Thank you. What I would suggest you do is to write something to the
Yeah, you fill up.
manager, your card,
Thank you.
with some contact information, obviously.
And I will follow up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Blue card. Commissioner, one?
First, thank you, Mr. Liberty, and all of the hardworking staff in the electric utility department. It takes a lot to keep us up and running, and I congratulate you and thank you for all your hard work. I do have a couple questions or some side notes, to throw out at you in this presentation. I would love to know what the commercial usage in 2019 versus now is. If you could try to find that data or compile the data. I just want to see where we are commercially. My concern is that with a lot of these empty storefronts, that we're not taking that into consideration for our future generationing of funding. So I want to make sure that we're not missing the mark on that we're not overstepping our or overshooting our thoughts on what we're going to be making or what we're going to need in the next 12 to 18 months. I was reviewing the minutes from the previous meeting with the previous agenda that we're going to be approving tonight that had to do with all EU back on February 23rd. And I had a couple questions in regards to some of the points that were brought up by the previous dais before I can move to approve these. And if you would be able to answer some of these questions, you and I had a conversation earlier today in regards to getting out language information in different languages via either the Noteworthy newsletter or the website. And it looks like Vice Mayor back then, Andy Amoroso, had the same concerns. So, I'm glad to see that, we're all thinking on the same page, that we want to be a very inclusive city and that we're looking at all these avenues on how to include all the residents in our city, especially those who are Spanish speaking. So I'm glad to see that that's in the wheelhouse that's going to happen. That makes me excited. A couple other things I wanted to ask is on the website, the cityownedergy.com, how are we making sure that our consumers, if you will, our residents and business owners are aware of that site and all the information that's on there? Are we using the city's own website as a driving tool only? Or do we have it on the trucks that are going around town? How are we getting that messaging out there, that marketing, if you will?
Good question. So it's promoted on the city's website. You can go to the COE, we call it the COE page directly, or you can link to it from the city's website. It's promoted in the annual report, various flyers. It's on all of our email addresses. We've talked about it in public meetings. Frankly, I don't know what the traffic is on the site. I haven't looked at it. I've looked at the site, obviously, but I need to check with the person who manages the site for us to see just what the hits were. I do know it very interesting. And when I asked for that information early on, we had thousands of hits that were coming from China and India, which is not the audience we were looking to reach, obviously, because
Right.
but the utility systems nationwide were under attack, and maybe somebody thought that's how they could get here, but or get into our system. That's what I mean by get into our systems, but that wasn't the case. But we can pull up that data to see what the audience has been. We do use it on signage in various things, and word has gotten out. We talk about it at a lot of meetings. But we don't have a banner on City Hall, for example, that says go to citizenownedergy.com. But it's like anything else, it can never be over promoted. Maybe I do want to go back to your question on the commercial use history. We do track residential and commercial use very, very closely. In fact, my team reports out to me on that monthly in terms of residential and commercial sales. And we took it a step further when COVID started. We were very concerned about what that was going to do to us, right, from a revenue point of view and the impact on our customers. And using our metering information, which was basically real time, and looking at real time logs, we could see that the balance shifted. So the residential customer consumption went up, but the commercial customer consumption went down, about evened out. That was about what we saw from a volume perspective, meaning kilowatt hours energy we were sending out to the customers. However, not more concerned, but also concerned from my point of view is those two products are differentially priced, right? So the gross margin on the commercial account is higher than the gross margin on the residential account. That's the way rate design is typically done. So it did have a gross margin impact on us, but nonetheless, we did exceed our operating income, or if you will, our budget and our operating income bottom line. We did exceed it for the year. And then we know that we also have a large number of customers on payment plans. We track that separately. But if we can get you more specific data in one-on-one, or certainly come back and present it. But we do have that data. We look at it very, very closely now that we're going in budget time. That's one of the things that in the turnaround, wanted to very closely understand what customer segments are growing or not growing and at what rate, and what's the send out happening. So we do look at that closely for budget purpose as well and forecasting where we're going. So we do have that data. I'll be glad to share it.
Thank you.
Good question. Is that it?
Yep, yes, ma'am.
Commissioner McFoy?
Yes, thank you. I'll take this off to be a little clearer. Thank you, Ed, for a lot of detail there and trying to get us, the new folks, up to speed on all the work. Thank you for the work and for improvements. Couple things that I wanted to mention. I really liked what you pointed out, that you're not with your crews optimizing for speed, you're optimizing for safety. Thank you. At 26 kV, we like that. Also, I'm glad that you are looking a lot for opportunities to do work with our in-house staff as much as possible, unless it's something that we simply just don't have the expertise or possibly specialized equipment. You mentioned some of the large cranes and so on. But where we do have the equipment and the people, I'm definitely in favor of building our in-house expertise and working with our in-house folks for some of the reasons that you mentioned, that they develop a relationship with the community. I can remember talking to a resident, longtime Lake Worth resident. I've talked to a number of them who were very impressed with how knowledgeable staff were during outages that came out and talked to them and, could fix things quickly, knew things quickly. In that vein, a little bit of a concern with the idea of remote customer service. Definitely hesitation of how that comes across to residents here, to talk to somebody who doesn't know the area, doesn't have a connection to the area. I recognize that'll be an ongoing topic with you to see the balance between benefits of far away versus local. A concern that I didn't hear mentioned along the way, but I do hear from customers from time to time, is voltage spikes that blow out people's electronics and can be quite expensive at the home level. I'm assuming from some of the discussions that you and I had separately that your focus on voltage regulators on some of the 25 kV lines should help with that. Is that a good assumption?
It is, and I'll add a little bit of technical detail there. So for the benefit of the audience, and you and I have talked about this a little bit, but I think it's helpful for everybody to have a good perspective on it. We send 26,000 volts out into the system, and at our substations, we step it down to 4,000 volts, and then it goes on 3 phases down the streets and into the neighborhoods and into hundreds of thousands or thousands of customers, depending on the area. Those 3 phases, A, B, and C phase, have voltage that's regulated by the transformer that looks at the outgoing voltage on one of those 3 phases and adjusts the voltage. We call it a tap changer. And it changes the voltage up and down to control the voltage out in the field. When you get far down the line, let's say we're tapping on, looking at phase B, just for argument's sake, we're not 100% sure where A and C are, but if those circuits are balanced, because we've had the right number of customers phase, they should be relatively close. But when you get to the far ends of the system, we may have things that are called capacitors, which allow us to increase the voltage and get some voltage support in some faraway areas, distant areas from the substation. Once we go to 26 kV, a lot of that problem goes away because we'll be bringing 26,000 volts into the station, but we're not going to be stepping it down. We're going to be regulating it and then further conditioning it to control what we call the fault currents, which is the current that you experience when you have a hard fault during a trip situation. It gets detailed, but the power quality will improve significantly once we do that beyond where we are today. As an interim step, what we've done is we use the AMI system to look at the voltages on each phase going into groups of homes and identify where we have voltage swells or voltage sags over time, understand how that's happening. And in some cases, rebalance the circuits, meaning we might take one home and move it to phase A, another home move it to phase C, and leave the other home on phase B, and rebalance the number of customers, or realize that we have way too many customers on a single transformer, and that's what's going to cause that transformer to fail. So we go look at that closely. Where we've had some voltage spikes, and we said, mea culpa, this was us. In the electrical world, if we lose the neutral, if we have failure of the neutral, we can have a voltage spike that would be caught then by the surge protection in the home if the customers have it. And that's very, very, very rare. And we do look for that, and we replace the service going to the home where we see a situation where the neutral has failed or broken and is no longer a good service connection. So we do look for that. So it's not all about just doing the big upgrade projects. We do have these, smaller cases where it's a failure of a service line, and when we identify that, we replace it.
If I could, Madam Mayor, a couple of follow-ups. You mentioned the AMI. I forget what the I is, but I assume it refers to the automatic meter reading, that we're remote reading them as opposed to an electronically, and it's sent over a radio frequency and all that stuff. How often does that read? Do you happen to remember? Is it 15-minute, 5-minute intervals? Is it?
It'll do very, very tight intervals, but because of the massive amounts of data, we're reading once per hour. Although I believe that we can refine that down close if we need to. Things like we do have voltage history. We can extract the data much more detailed if we want to, but the meter read is typically, I believe, an hourly read.
And the reason I asked is, with that's an enormous data source, knowing what's happening at each house. Do we use that currently to map outages so that, because we're getting that information hourly is not very high resolution, but do we use that at all to map outages?
Yes, we do. So that's a part of our outage management function. So what we do, we capture a blink, for example, if a contractor or there's an out, either a contractor pulls the meter or a customer pulls the meter, or there's an outage at the home. Let's say the service to the home failed. That will reflect within a few seconds, or certainly within a few minutes, on the screen in our system operations center. The operator, depending on what else is going on, will then dispatch the trouble crew, the trouble truck, to that scene to determine why that's happened. In some cases, if it's a multi-phase customer, a customer has more than single-phase service, 3-phase service, it may be a partial power situation that we're seeing, but we'll roll a truck to that as well. So we are using it for outage response, not hours after the customer's seen the problem, but within a few minutes. So if it's a slow evening, which we hope to have a lot of slow evenings and slow nights and slow days, if that pops up on the screen, we'll roll the truck to the scene very, very quickly on the radio, dispatch the truck right there. We use the data, though, historically, if we've had an outage in an area or we're chasing a transient or something that we can't quite figure out what happened, we'll use that data as a clue, as evidence to help narrow down where the problem could be and what it could be. It's more information to help us resolve concerns. And as I mentioned earlier, we do look at it for voltage. If we're trying to see what's happening on various phases far down the line from the substation, do we have these voltage imbalances? So we could look at, the homes that are served off of a single transformer. So for example, if we're seeing voltage sags, that could be an indication that we have too much load on a single pole top transformer. And AMI will help us figure that out, and we'll move some of the customers. We'll set a second transformer and split those customers between transformers. So it's proven useful in that regard.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. It's certainly a wealth of data that we never had when we were manually reading meters on a monthly basis. The other last question, you mentioned utility bills, and I think it might have come up in the minutes that Commissioner Malega referred to. And I think it came up in a contract. I guess it's on the contract here. I just like to go on record that one of the things that I'm looking for to help deal with our reputation our not so good reputation in Lake Worth with electric. I would like us to be thinking about the possibility, two things. One, that we very explicitly, even to different colored separate pieces of paper, separate the water sewer bill from the electric bill, so that when people are looking at their electric total, that's the only total that's on that piece of paper. And then the second one that kind of goes with that is make sure that our bill design, as much as possible, looks like an FP&L bill, adds more information if we can do better, but that it looks like an FP&L bill, so that when people are doing a comparison, it's an apples to apples comparison. Because I think we get a lot of our or a portion, I don't know the percentage, but a portion of our reputation comes from people pick up the bill, they look at the bottom line number, and it's everything. And they compare it to their aunt that's over in FP&L, and that's not a fair comparison.
Sure.
So let's do our part on the bill design and the bill printing to help at least deal with that piece of it.
You make a very good point, sir, and you know, we've thought about some of those things, but and I've also mentioned your ideas to Franco Bolito and on our customer service side. Very, very good idea. We're gonna vet all these ideas and get a group involvement. I think one of the things that happens sometimes, and I'm certainly to some extent probably guilty of this, is say, you know, we already thought of that. We're already working. There's a reason why it's this way, or I like the bill the way it is. I think it makes sense. And certainly coming from a technical point of view, we may look and say, well, it's technically correct, right? But that's not the right answer. The right answer is, does the customer understand it? Right? Does it make sense? And ultimately, do they think it's fair? Right? So, and is it in multiple languages and things like that? So there's room for improvement there. And that's certainly something that we want input on. This is not something that staff on its own in a dark room behind the scenes should concoct and then roll out and say, here it is. So this is certainly something that lends itself well to community involvement, because frankly, you don't have to be a technical expert on utilities to say, this is what I want my bill to look like, so I understand it, so I pay it and pay it on time. And I'm not confused by it. I don't need to call you to ask for an explanation, right? So there's room for improvement there. We welcome that.
Thank you.
Good question. Good. Okay. Commissioner Robinson?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot you're up there. You're so full down. I know. Hi, Commissioner Stokes. Sorry. Do you have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions at this time. Very impressed with the amount of different projects that are in the works, and I look forward to learning more.
A lot to learn. Thank you. Commissioner Robinson?
Yeah, this electric 201 coming up, I guess. Really, the management has the momentum that your management style has really affected everybody's, and you're still contributing to the general fund. So you're proactive instead of reactive. Fantastic. You didn't mention, and it's hard to mention, the negotiations that you've done with the bonding and the contracts that you've established. I don't expect you to, but I'm aware that you've negotiated very well on the part of Lake Worth Beach. So that needs to be known. Whether we can talk about it or not is something else. But the customer service has really, Franco has stepped up. Could you have a deadline for a billing change that was mentioned earlier? Can you present us with a few choices on the billing improvements in the near future?
Absolutely. The deadline will be 1 year, because that's when this bill printing contract, if you approve the extension, will expire. But we're not going to wait till month 11 to come and ask you for some ideas.
Thank
right?
you.
So I want to start that process, as I think that the number of things that'll have to happen. One is we want to define what it'll look like, and then we'll have to make sure that the technology is capable of doing it. So what do I mean by that? The billing information actually has to come out of our customer information system, our city ERP system, to generate these bills, right? So we are going to need to have our current ERP provider, which is Central Square, and the Naviline product has to be able to extract, the information and receive information from the billing system. So we need to make sure that the things that we want are the things that Central Square can in fact support, and that if they can support it, that it gets in queue in their project management team to make whatever changes we want done. Because the bill printer is just going to print the bill based on the information that they're sent. So it's not just as simply as saying, don't take this the wrong way, as saying use one color paper versus another, or use a different size envelopes. And I don't mean to minimize the task at all, but some of this is going to have to do with the style and the manner and the format in which the data is going to come out of our systems and go over to the bill printer. And we have to fix that as well. And so it's going to take us time, but we're not going to wait till month 11. I imagine we're going to get working on this in the next month or two and forming the teams that go look at this, including community involvement too.
Well, the cost of changing it after we've come under this new contract, I expect it to be part of the new contract. Is that?
Yes.
Okay. The vacancy, commercial vacancy, is, and the rate is definitely different. And that will be part of a discussion later on. And can we offer an incentive, say, a time period of incentive at a lesser rate, still making money, but as an incentive to invite newcomers?
Yes, we do currently have an economic development incentive, which at least one customer has availed themselves of, and it's been helpful for them. I personally think we need more. What we need to do in the near term is bring all of you up to speed in one-on-ones on the cost of service study that's been undertaken and where that stands. Frankly, we're almost to the point, or pretty much at the point, where now we need to start having some philosophy discussions and direction from you on which way you want us to go. Our cost of service study is reinforcing or confirming that our cash flow models, what we believe to be gross margins and profitability, those type of things are correct. And what we need to then decide is, how do we want to adjust the rates? We're not anticipating rate increases. I'm not saying that's never going to happen. What I will say publicly is, before I come and ask you or to consider a rate increase, then I also need to tell you we've done everything we can to reduce costs. So I don't view rate increases as an immediate way to solve problems. I view cost reduction and proper accounting treatment and capitalization versus expensing of things to be the solution, and followed by rate increases where absolutely necessary. And then there may be some things that we want to do surgically as opposed to wholesale. So we're going to be engaging you in those discussions to go through that and give you all the opportunity to read through the early documents, because we're getting to the point where now we need more policy. So there'll be an education component, and then I'm assuming that there'll probably be some workshops, right? And so for more open dialogue and discussion between your regulatory or ruling body, if you will, on what direction you want us to go in. But we are not in a crisis in terms of money and saying, we have to raise rates immediately or something like that. That's not the case. From a competitive point of view, we know that other utilities are, in fact, have already requested rather significant rate increases. We have no such plans. My suggestion is we're going to be holding the line the cycle.
Yeah, the one word that hasn't been mentioned tonight, either from you or us, is perception. And that's an educational process, but it's also words matter. And when leadership, us and you and throughout the city, don't emphasize the positive side of your operation, it's easy to be negative. And perception is really a problem for Lake Worth Beach in a lot of different areas. We need to mind our words when we're talking about our successes and I just think that it's important that when we work towards solving, making it better, we don't go at it from the negative side. We should emphasize the perception that we are doing very well. So, thank you.
Thank you. Your kind words. I know, rest assured that staff listens and is gets the feedback that comes from this body, but also from the public. And I can tell you that there's no harsher critic of our performance than ourselves. And the mood in staff here in our offices when we do have an outage is a tough one because we expect better and we want to do better. And we know that the aftershock is coming in terms of public opinion after we have outages that we don't want to have either. So, we work very hard, and I don't think that changes whether you're, wearing an IBEW shirt or wearing a management shirt, or over in customer service fielding hundreds of phone calls from upset folks when we do have an outage. So we're tough judges of ourselves. We want to do better for you, and you've now given us the tools to go and do that. And that's what we're working hard to do.
Thank you, Mr. Lemley. Great, that's it. Ms. Robinson? Done?
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
I don't want to, I have tendency to cut people off. I don't want to do that. I just have a couple questions and I want to follow up. I mean, I've been a customer of Lake Worth Utilities for 40 years and it has never been better. And I think, and I hope and I hear from you, Mr. Liberty, that the message that's coming from this dais now is we've got to get the word out to people. There's a lot of perception is reality to people. And we've got to find a way of individually and as a city to get that information out there so that when you hear, well, Lake Worth Utilities, we have the actual facts to show and to publish those facts regularly so that people do understand that we're doing a much better job than we used to do. My only question, and I appreciate the questions every place else, is what I'd like to do, and this is not a pop quiz, but I'd like to find out how much money is still out from the COVID crisis. People are on paid plans and things. How much do they still owe? I'd like, if we could find that out, that would be helpful because I think we've got a lot of questions coming up in the near future about funds that are coming in. And I just want to see if there's any way to just find that information out. Is that possible?
Oh, absolutely. We would report that on a regular basis. We can do that as quickly as the next meeting. We do track it. It's updated no less than monthly. It's tracked by the payment plans, whether it's residential or commercial. What percentage of people are honoring or not honoring the payment plan. The bad debt number, meaning how much has gone out for collections, is tracked very closely. Number of people who have received much needed assistance from the county cares program, how many referrals have gone to them, how many people are being helped and to what extent. We have all of that detail and we can make sure that we get it on the agenda for an upcoming meeting.
And you can tell us who's honoring the agreement that they came to and who's not? We
have that letter of detail. We don't bring it out in a public session. We don't want to.
Understood.
We do have that level of detail, and technically speaking, it is public information. But we could certainly get you that if you wanted to go that deep. Although might not be
might not have to. Let's just see where we're at. And I see the city manager has his light on.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Commissioners, also on that topic, we're researching and looking very closely at the federal ARPA funding. To your point, it's probably where you're going. So when we come to that discussion and workshop on that presentation, we'll hopefully give you confirmation if those funds can be used on those recovery of lost income in that category. We believe it does. So we'll have that nailed down for you.
Thank you. And Mr. McCoy, do you have another comment?
I do, to come back and for commission, the question of perception of the utility. I agree with Herman that we want to be positive. That's good. But I also think we want to be very open-eyed and understanding what the perception is out there. I think that perception might break down into three areas. One is the voltage spikes. That's probably the smallest portion of it, but it's a big deal for some people if they blow out a lot of electronics. The next one is outages, which definitely people care about. And I have one more comment on the outages. And the third one is the cost. And my very strong impression for a long time, and it was reinforced again to knocking on doors all around the city, is people do not believe that our costs are at parity with FP&L because they don't really care about the cost. They don't know what it is. They don't know what FP&L's cost is, that it's 10 cents a kilowatt hour. They don't know that their aunt in West Palm Beach is paying 10 cents a kilowatt hour. They just look at the total bill. And there we have issues that we still need to work on, I think, very much on that bill size aspect. And I'll be reaching out to you, Ed, to look at some of the data and see if we can understand where that perception is coming from. On the outages, a comment, and I'm looking for feedback from you, Ed, but my understanding as general engineering practice is as you're looking to increase reliability of any engineering system, as you get closer and closer to 100%, the cost of getting closer to 100% goes exponentially out the ceiling. And so I think a part of our perception management is also helping customers understand that you don't want us to never have a power outage because your bills would be 100 times what they are now to achieve that. You want it to be infrequent. We want to maybe focus on the little short dropouts that reset everybody's clocks and all that sort of stuff that's annoying, but doesn't really do that much. So I think we want to build some degree of community understanding that, yes, we want outages to be as small as possible, but there's a trade-off in cost. And the cost trade-off gets very high as you get toward the last stretch.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, just real quick.
Sure.
Just going back to one thing that I'm going to advocate for, just to be vocal, Ed, is again, it's that perception of the bill. And I always tell people, well, I lived in Delray, and if I took the Delray city bill of water and sewer and garbage and added it to my FPL bill, therein you get the one bill that you get from the city of Lake Worth. So I think a lot of that is education component as well. I really want to talk about commercial rates because commercial rates are putting us out of a level playing field. And I know that's something we need to discuss quickly. But going back to what the mayor had addressed in regards to how many people are still behind, one thing that I can say that as a local business owner that I was shocked at is that when COVID happened, business owners were not allowed to use their security deposit to keep them current. And then with the repayment plan on that security deposit. So when we get this information on who's behind, maybe we can look at what is the security deposit they have on file. Can we allow them to use a portion of that and then put them into a repayment plan for 12 or 24 months on that security deposit? So it brings in it gives them the opportunity to get caught up, but also reduces a little bit of the risk with the city.
Thank you. Commissioner, hi. Commissioner Stokes.
Just one quick thing from what I'm hearing as well with the high utility rates. I know that we've talked a lot about conservation and exactly like they are cost. So I think separating out the bills is great, but I also think that you can have I've asked people knocking on doors, are you sure it's the electric? My water bill seems higher than my electric bill. And they're adamant that it's about their electric bill. And I've seen a lot of homes that haven't had those upgraded windows and insulation and things of that matter. So I do think we need to also do another public campaign for conservation, not just education about rates. And also with our ability to, you mentioned you have so many data points on usage. So I would love it if there was a way to identify maybe the top, are there any outliers? Like, is there a way for us to look or like have something with that data that we're getting in and saying, wow, this person is using this much energy. Maybe we should go knock on their door, and not wait for them to come around. I think that would be a really amazing step for our city if we could use data in that way.
Great, that's a good idea.
So, Mayor, if I may, these are very, very good points. And on the conservation fund, we do use the data. So we've had situations where a customer might call and said, my bills are crazy. And during the COVID era, we have not gone into people's homes. So we do have an energy audit team, conservation team, with 2 people in it that still does that work, but they do it remotely by looking at the billing data, doing a drive-by, asking the customer questions. And by the way, lately I've had them focused on making sure that all the programmable thermostats in city buildings are working correctly. For example, just to get our own house in order. So we're getting good use out of those folks, but it's not unusual when we drill down into a customer's energy use, they find out, oh, my thermostat, I didn't know the house had the air conditioner on. Why is your energy use so high at, overnight or something like that? And they start to realize, is the thermostat programmed correctly? Or do you have a programmable thermostat? So the energy that level of detail, which you're mentioning, and I know Commissioner McBoy gets to as well, is we have the technology, not 100%. We're not in the house watching what you're doing, but we can see what's going through the meter and the time of day that it's going through there to get an idea of what's actually happened. How often is that pool pump likely running, right? And the filter and stuff like that. And that spills over to water too, because we can see water use that may not match with what the customer's perception of what their actually sprinkling cycle might be, right? So there's a lot of work that we can help customers, and that's we do rely on those tools. That's very, very helpful. We can get down to looking at energy use per square foot and then looking across and saying, for that style house, that energy use is very high. Now, what we don't know is that they have, 2 or 3 kids or 4 kids in the house, another family member, they have an electric vehicle, maybe, not too many of those, but we don't know that. But it allows you to have an educated conversation with the customer, help lead them to solution. In terms of our bills, I do look very closely when we do benchmark our electric bill versus the bill that somebody might get from an adjoining utility. And we'll run the same number of kilowatt hours and say, well, if I lived in that town, what would my bill be? And if I live in Lake Worth, what would my bill be? I can tell you that for the 1,000 kilowatt hour customer or less, that difference is about 2.5, 2.75%. And on the 1,200 kilowatt hour customer, it might be up in the range of 6 or 7%.
Higher?
Yeah, we're a little bit higher. In both cases, we're slightly higher. Well, we do know that another utility in the area has filed to increase their rates approximately 9 to 10%. So, and that's not to say that that's exactly what their rates will wind up to be. It's a very lengthy regulatory process and a lot of stakeholders involved in that discussion, and we'll see where they land. But we're holding the line, and we also, it speaks to the education, and that was in the presentation that we did on the value of the electric utility to the city of Lake Worth Beach. The number of things in the absolute dollars that are being covered by the electric utility on behalf of the citizenry and the surrounding community that are in the electric bill that are not in the electric bill of other providers in the area. So you're getting a lot more value for your electric utility bill payment in the city of Lake Worth Beach than you would if you were served by another utility nearby. So that doesn't mean that it's good or bad, it's just different, right? There's things that this electric utility pays for that other electric utilities don't pay for. And that's in the cost structure. And of course, there's significant contributions that we make to the city, not just in general fund, but a lot of things, which by the way, are not necessarily inappropriate. They are what they are, but they are in the electric bill. So that's something we want folks to be aware of too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We just have to stop talking about the high utility bills or rates when there's a difference between a rate and usage. That's the perception that we're fighting, and everybody complains about their bill. They should be talking about the consumption and usage, not the rate.
Right, well, that makes the bill. It's rate equal rate plus usage.
The difference is that the consumption can be controlled. The rate is competitive.
Right.
We need to work on that perception.
Right.
And it was mentioned that because of the inefficiency of the homes but we have to stop talking about our high utility bills in terms of rates.
Right, and I think that's what Mr. Liberty was talking about, but going in your question, going into why is your,
But then we continue to talk about the high bills.
okay. Um, Anything else? Oh, Mr. Boy.
I do think this is a very important topic because the issue of our city is damaged by the perception that's very strong out there that we have high bills. And I agree with Commissioner Robinson that we need to focus on both things.
Right.
We can't do much with the rate. We're pretty much at parity, but the perception is still there. And that's why I'm so focused on the bills. I was going to raise exactly the same thing that Commissioner Stokes did. Let's use the bill data that we have and look at the usage and look at square footages, do some analysis. And I'll be getting together with Ed to try and work on that. We really need to work on this one a lot because
Oh, yeah, I mean,
it hurts us.
Yeah, a house with jealousy windows and room air conditioners is gonna use a lot more than the
A
house.
brand new home.
That's correct. And we have to help people understand, and we have to have a strong conservation program that addresses some of that
Educate.
where possible.
Right, that's why I'm glad we're all talking about this. I think we're all on the same page as far as educating the public and educating
I
ourselves.
have a really quick question,
Oh,
really quick. Do you guys have a PACE program?
no, we're not gonna take
Yes.
that. Okay, but thank you. Okay, next up is the approval of the minutes, which is interesting because only one of us was here for those minutes. And I'm wondering if we can actually approve minutes that we were not present.
Madam Mayor, I believe so, but we have our illustrious attorney if you want to ask that question.
Hi, Christy.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Once y'all review those minutes, if they seem generally acceptable, you are able to authorize those minutes. They are prepared by the city clerk's office after being present at the meeting and watching and listening to the video.
Okay, thank you.
I have one question for the meeting, the minutes.
I'm sorry.
I just have one question in regards to the minutes.
Oh, okay.
On the resolution 06-2021 for the local funding agreement, does that include new crosswalk lights and push buttons? Does anybody know?
Where are
You were
you?
here for that process?
Madam Mayor, I believe Commissioner Maliga is referring to the FDOT agreement on the intersections here. I'm pointing actually
Right.
to physically where they are.
Where are we?
It's under new business in the meetings.
It's my understanding
Minutes.
that those new crosswalks, the new arms and all the things that we've been waiting so long with buttons that actually exist will all be part of that.
Okay,
So that there'll be a truly functional intersection, especially for the folks running between the buses, which is quite dangerous.
yes, thank you. That was my only question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So do I have a motion?
Motion to approve minutes.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
I'm sorry, who made the second? Was that Commissioner McVoy?
It was.
It was.
Thank you.
That man behind the.
Okay, so the consent agenda is next. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
aye,
Any against? Hearing none? It approved unanimously. New business.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Item A under new business is for the purchase of breakers. These are magnetically actuated 38 kV outdoor vacuum circuit breakers. And one of the questions would be, well, we've heard a lot about 26 kV, 4 kV, 138 kV. Why are we suddenly seeing 38 kV? That refers to a class of equipment, and these are large breakers that would go into our substations. And that means that, hey, we can operate it at, it's intended to operate at 26 kV, but it's been beefed up, if you will, with higher level insulation so it can operate at higher voltages. What we've shied away from, we want to shy away from this, for example, buying stuff that is suitable at 26, but at the upper range of its capability. We want to have stuff that's suitable for 26, but at the middle or lower range of its capability. So it has to last us decades and decades in a difficult environment here. And that's why you'll see 38 kV. So these are switches or breakers that you're going to see us installing in many of our substations. We want to have kind of a continuity of supply with the manufacturer, but also standardization of parts, our understanding of how to maintain them, inventory practices, and how we work with them, all of that. So you'll see more of these coming down the road.
So it's a little less wear and tear on each one because it's got a higher capacity. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and less, less susceptible to risk of failure from a short circuit or a ground fault type situation.
Thank you. Any other questions? Motion to approve?
I have a question.
Oh, there, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Thank you.
All right, I just want some clarification on things. I was looking at the term of the initial agreement is for 2 years with 2 additional single-year renewal options. And we want to extend the terms without changing them. And I just wanted to understand, because when I look at the budget on the back, it shows that we're going to have an expenditure in 2021, but we're not going to be, we haven't budgeted for anything in those subsequent years. So I just want to understand what is it? Are we just keeping that contract open for more purchasing needs, or what is, like, why do we need these additional years and the renewal, and why do we want to increase it by a year? I just want to understand that.
It's very insightful question. So what we definitely want to do is we want to leave that contract in place so we can buy additional devices under this contract in future years. But we don't want to buy all those devices now because it consumes the capital that we need for other projects. So we have roughly $44 million between the CIP and the SHRIP bond money, and we're doling it out in measured doses on a project by project basis. So, and the ability to have multi-year contracts allows us to buy at a known price under certain terms and conditions for, let's say, the first 2 years. And then we have the ability, if we still like that, to go another year or say, stop, let's rebid to see if there's a better deal in the marketplace, or even if this supplier will give us even better terms. So it gives us a little bit more flexibility, but we don't want to, use up all of our spending capacity sooner than we want to. So for example, what does that mean? So if we have roughly $44 million to spend right now for capital and for system hardening, reliability improvement, that's basically $44 million of commitment capability. That doesn't mean that it'll all absolutely be finished. So it's entirely possible that before we get to the end of the contract, we're going to ask you to buy, we'll want to buy more stuff, but we don't have more money that we can commit yet because we haven't done the next round of funding, right? So we don't want to burn up the availability of capital by buying things now that we won't need for some time, right? So we want to make sure that we buy long lead time material to get here just in time for the construction to be conducted and to have some adequate spares. So
So this doesn't lock us in with this vendor exclusively. We still, okay. And then that was another thing I had a question about, because I was really excited. Oh, the RMAG is the next generation of technology, and I'm sure you guys do your due diligence and everything, but I was just wondering how new it is. I get a little nervous about like the brand new technology, because sometimes that's where a lot of the bugs happen, and how much we want to commit to that. So if you could just make me feel comfortable.
Yeah, there's a lot of times we say new, and it new to us means everybody else has been using it for some number of years.
Okay.
We are not in the business of demonstrating new technologies, and we're in the business of implementing tried and proven technologies. We are not a laboratory per se, and we do look across to see what other people are putting on their test results, and seeing what they're using that works. We're not going to buy something that's the first of a kind and see if we want to try it. That's not who we are.
Yeah, I think it's important to be leaders in certain areas, but not in a risky kind of way. So, thank you. That's all I have for that.
Any other questions? Mr. McVoy.
This is one I had for you when we met Monday, I guess, Ed, whether these were DC actuated, that they're still good if the power is out, that they can still be controlled. And I think you were going to check on that. So
Yeah, I'll look to Walt Gill, who's in the background here, our Assistant Director T&D. Walt, do you want to chime in? My understanding is that these are all DC.
They are DC activated. That is
Yeah.
correct.
And our substations have battery backup as well.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second, I believe. Do we have a motion?
Motion to
We do
approve.
not.
Okay, that's Commissioner Robinson, motion to approve, second by Commissioner McVoy. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Moving on to B, new business B. Mr. Liberty?
Yes, so this is to approve a EC Fennel, which is a local engineering firm, to go ahead with the design of the what we call the 0601, 0602, and 0604 circuits. So what does that mean? Those are circuits that come out of our 7th Avenue, I'm sorry, out of the 6th Avenue South substation. And there's currently 4 circuits coming out of there. Those 3 circuits need to be redesigned for their upgrade to 26 kV and the conversion. They need to be designed to work together so that one can take the load of the other in case we lose a breaker or a voltage regulator back at the station, but also to be able to be interconnected in segments with what we call, switches or reclosers, sectionalizers, devices like that we put in the field. So we've selected EC Fennel to do that work on those 3 circuits. Now, what will happen in parallel? So they're going to be just doing design at this point. So it's the design work so that we can then give that design package to the construction companies that would then bid to do this work based on that design. So we need to be able to hand them a design that's supported by our design spec, our construction spec, if you will, so that they know exactly what they're ultimately going to build to. In parallel with that, which has not come to your approval yet, is the design work for the substation itself. So the substation configuration will need to change from a station that takes 26,000 volts in, transforms it to 4. It's going to take 26 in and then voltage regulated to a cleaner 26. So that piece will have to be engineered and designed and then constructed while these circuits are being constructed. So all of that stuff comes together, like the old picture of the railroad, making sure that the ends meet like they're supposed to. So this is getting that design work going in the field. So when they do their design, they'll be looking very closely at what the fuse sequences or trip sequences of the breakers, the fuse protection schemes need to be, the wire sizes, where the poles will be, the strength of the poles to withstand the Category 5 storms, where the transformers will be, implementing Walt Gill's thoughts on moving transformers to out of the alleyways and to the ends of the alleyways so they're more readily accessible by truck, making sure that one transformer can carry all the homes on that alley, one or the other. So they'll be bringing all of those design elements in as they do that work. So it's we don't and we won't just rush into these and say, well, we'll figure it out as we go, type of thing. No, we're going to have a design from an engineering firm that they'll be able to hand to the construction companies that they can all walk the routes, put their proposals together, and give us a good construction cost estimate.
So this is connected to what we approved the other day, the whole 20, all this big conversion that we're doing. This is part of that.
This is a duplicate of it in the sense that was around 7th Avenue North.
This is
Same concept as 6th Avenue South. Yes.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion. By Commissioner Robinson, second.
Second.
By Commissioner Maliga. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, passes 5-0. Now we are on C.
I apologize, Madam Mayor. I did not hear who made the motion.
Robinson, Commissioner Robinson.
Thank you.
Speak up, Commissioner. So are we on B or C now?
C.
C, that's what I thought. We are moving right along. Thank you. Mr. Liberty. would you
Okay.
like-
Yes, Madam Mayor. This is for the 4th circuit that currently comes out of that station. And you say, well, why did you separate those? Well, because this one, I believe, is already at 26, correct? Well, so the other 3 circuits
Yes, sir.
have to be engineered and designed to be upgraded converted and upgraded. This circuit needs to be upgraded because it's already at 26, but we also need to make sure that it's done in this way that it'll link with the others. So it's a slightly different scope of work because it's not a lot of revoltaging, if you will. Upgrading voltage has to be done. It's just harden it and then link it to the others. So it made sense to split that out as a separate task. And that's why it's standing on its own as opposed to blended in with the others. It helps us manage the dollars in the budget line items better and project manage it as well. So there's our own little brains operate that way. We like to have it as a separate,
It's good. It's good. Do I have any questions from the commissioners? We have a motion to approve
So moved.
by Mr. McVoy, second
Second.
by Ms. Maliga. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All
Aye.
opposed? Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving right along. This is D.
D.
D as in dog.
That's what I said, right, D. Okay.
This is one that we wish we didn't have to come forward, but this is our current bill printing contractor. We had intended to move on with a different bill printing contractor.
Yeah.
But this particular contractor or printing entity was not willing to do a short extension on their contract while we brought their competitor on to take over the business. I can understand it from a business point of view. It's a harsh position to have taken, but it's the position they took. So we're asking for a 1-year extension. The good I think that will come out of this is that we have a very energized, wanting to get involved, roll up the sleeves, commission to help redesign what that new bill should look like. So we should make good use of the time while we're under this extension to be absolutely ready to go with a new bill. And it's entirely possible that this provider bids better again in the next round and may be successful. We'll see. But we'll use that 12-month period for good purpose.
Well, actually, we'll use probably less than 12 months.
Yes.
for that.
Yes.
Get our homework done before it becomes the last minute. I'm saying that to myself as well. Do I have any questions?
Deadlines are good.
I'm sorry?
Deadlines are good.
Deadlines are a good thing. No questions? Having seen none, do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
By Commissioner McVoy, second by
Second.
Commissioner Robinson, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Having heard none, motion passes 5-0. Mr. Liberty, thank you very much. You're putting a lot of information into a lot of new ears, so we appreciate every little bit that you do and your staff as well. It's really neat.
And your contribution to the general fund.
And your contribution to the general fund, much appreciated.
Then there's that.
And then there's that.
We
Thank
take
you. Compliment and the continued support.
Thank you very much. I think the bill thing's gonna solve a lot of problems. I really do.
Madam Chair?
I was just gonna ask, but you just jumped right ahead.
Nope, I was just.
Do I have a second to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that passes 5-0. Have a wonderful evening, everybody. See you Thursday night for the 15th.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Thank you.